Have you ever held the Bible in your hands and just wondered how it all fits together? I mean, it's not just one book, right? It's a library of 66 books written over centuries by dozens of different people. Today, we're going to dive into the hidden architecture that holds all of it together. And what we find is a level of complexity that is, well, it's truly mind-blowing. So this is the central mystery we're going to explore. How is it possible for a book written by so many different people over such a huge span of time to tell one single coherent story from the first page to the last? On the surface, it just sounds impossible. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of this thing. We're not talking about a handful of writers collaborating in the same room. We have fishermen, kings, soldiers, and prophets writing over 1,500 years across 3 different continents in 3 different languages. By all logical standards, the result should be a complete jumble of disconnected, maybe even contradictory ideas. But that's not what we find at all. So how does this unity actually work? Well, the answer lies in this hidden network, an internal blueprint that weaves every single book, chapter, and verse together. Let's take a look at how this system is built. The key to this whole thing is something called cross-references. You can think of them as the original hyperlinks. They're these little pointers where one part of the Bible intentionally quotes or alludes to or clarifies another part, and they create this incredibly dense web of connections. Now, here's the number that really shows you the scale of this network. The data shows there are at least 63,779 formal cross-references. And get this, that's just the direct links. It doesn't even count the hundreds of thousands of more subtle, thematic connections. We are looking at a network of absolutely immense complexity. You know, this quote from Jordan Peterson just nails the idea in modern terms. The Bible as the first hyperlink book. Long before we ever had the internet, this text was built with a really similar structure. Each verse can be a gateway to dozens of others, creating this literary web so deep you could explore it for your entire life and never, ever find the end. But here's the thing. These connections aren't just random. They form a very specific pattern, one of foreshadowing and fulfillment. We see an event or a theme pop up in the Old Testament that might seem strange or incomplete on its own, only for it to be perfectly resolved hundreds or even thousands of years later in the New Testament. Let's look at a couple of really powerful examples. So, in the book of Genesis, Abraham is asked to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac, but he stopped at the very last second. Now, the source material points out that this is a really strange and difficult story that doesn't make a lot of sense by itself, but when you look at it through the lens of these cross-references, it's seen as a type or a foreshadowing of a future event where God would sacrifice his only son. And that time, the sacrifice would not be stopped. Okay, here's another powerful example of this pattern. In the book of Numbers, people are dying from snake bites. The cure? To look at a bronze serpent, which is a symbol of the very curse that's killing them, lifted up on a pole. It's a pretty strange story on its own. But then, hundreds of years later, the New Testament draws a direct line to this event, explaining it as a picture of Jesus, who would be lifted onto a cursed object, the cross, to save everyone who looks to him. And when you start following thousands of these cross-references, you discover they aren't just connecting random dots. Nope. They are all working together to tell a single, overarching story in 5 main acts. A story that spans the entire Bible: creation, the fall, the promise of redemption, the act of redemption itself, and finally, the restoration of everything. So, what does all of this incredible unity imply? I mean, if you have thousands of narrative threads that are woven together perfectly across centuries by dozens of authors who never even met, what does that tell you about who or what is ultimately telling the story? The argument presented in the sources is that this level of coherence is just not possible through natural means. It's like watching a movie where dozens of random details that make no sense suddenly come together perfectly in the final scene, but on a scale that is just exponentially more complex. And this brings us right back to the central puzzle. How could these authors, separated by generations and entire empires, with no way to coordinate with each other, possibly collaborate on a single, perfectly integrated story? From a purely human perspective, it seems impossible. So the conclusion offered by the source material is that this points to a single general editor, orchestrating the whole project from outside of time, an author who can weave the end of the story into its very beginning. And that author, the sources propose, is God. Now, understanding this whole structure isn't just some cool academic exercise. It's really an invitation to engage with the text in a completely new way, to see it not as a collection of disconnected rules or old stories, but as the single, coherent narrative it claims to be. And this is exactly why, throughout the text itself, there's this constant call to not just read, but to study and search the scriptures. The idea is that understanding this grand, interconnected story isn't just for scholars. It's essential for understanding your own place within it. This leads to a really key principle for reading. Scripture interprets Scripture. The basic idea is that the text itself holds the keys to its own meaning, mainly through this incredible network of cross-references we've been exploring. But at the same time, this journey of discovery isn't meant to be a solo mission. The text also suggests that true understanding is best found in community, with the help of teachers and guides.
And this might be the most fascinating takeaway of all. The Bible presents itself as being clear enough for absolutely anyone to understand its core message, yet so deeply layered and interconnected that the journey of tracing these tens of thousands of links is one that can truly last a lifetime. No matter how many times you've read it, the story is always, always deeper than you think.